Want to welcome you guys back to another episode of Pistons Talk Podcast presented by FanDuel. In today's episode, we're going to be reading and reacting an article from Anscapes.com written by Mark Spears. The basketball Mark Spears, not the football Mark Spears, because there are two at ESPN. He caught up with former Piston Isaiah Stewart, and I wanted to read a couple of quotes from the article. There's one quote in particular that I think that we're going to probably be dissecting a little bit and talking about for a few minutes. There was also, his kind of opinion on Jalen Duren contract extensions. But let's get into this article. So the first part of the article, Stu does kind of show love to the city of Detroit and Detroit Pistons fans, and it says, "quote." I have so much love for the city of Detroit, Stewart said. They welcomed me with open arms. Coming in at 19, I instantly went to the community just naturally. There are a lot of great people that are doing a lot of great things in Detroit. So that's the first quote of this article from Mark Spears of Isaiah Stewart and how he has love for the city of Detroit and Detroit Pistons fans. I think the one thing that I always appreciated about Isaiah Stewart was nicest guy you'll ever meet, very active in the community, very charitable person, but never felt like he was a player that was unapproachable. Like you could go up to Isaiah Stewart, ask for a picture, and he would talk to you for a couple of minutes. I always appreciated that about Isaiah Stewart, very professional. And as a competitor on the court, I always appreciated like how much he gave his all. Now there were situations where he did crash out a little bit, and I think as fans, like the first couple of years, we're like, hell yes, Stu. But when you're starting getting suspended, like this past year, where you're like jumping off the bench and you get suspended for multiple games, that's when you're like, okay, like you gotta like calm down a little bit. We can't have you leaving the bench and you're suspended for what was it, like 7, 8 games? I don't even remember the full suspension length, but I do remember it was for quite a long time. But that was the first part of the article. The second part of the article was this past season, and kind of want to read this as well. So Isaiah Stewart on this season in the 25-26 season. Quote, bittersweet. We had a great season, Stewart said, 60 wins, number one in the East. And that's how I always pictured Detroit since I got drafted. Bringing back that identity, that toughness brand to Detroit. I feel like we did that in the regular season, and the playoffs came and didn't go exactly how we planned or talked about. So, one of the first things that I absolutely love about this quote from Isaiah Stewart was bringing back that identity, that toughness brand to Detroit. And I think as Pistons fans, like before we drafted Isaiah Stewart and before Troy Weaver was the general manager of the Detroit Pistons, I think the one thing that was always missing during previous regimes and previous new front office members is I don't really think we drafted players that kind of fit the Detroit Pistons mold in the culture. And Isaiah Stewart fit the bill with the culture 100%. And that's one thing I can give Troy Weaver credit for. Like, he had always talked about restoring the culture and the identity. And I felt like Stu did that here for Detroit. He did that for the Detroit Pistons. He brought back that culture that a lot of us grew up. I know I grew up watching the 2004 Pistons because I'm 34. I didn't get to grow up with the bad boy Pistons, but I know a lot of you guys that comment on these podcasts, comment comment on these YouTube videos, even podcast comments of the bad boys and how they were tough and we need to get back into that defensive identity. I felt like Isaiah Stewart did that. Now, the other part of the quote that I found pretty interesting was how he always pictured Detroit, getting back to that identity, the toughness. But the regular season, they felt like they did a good job with that. And the playoffs came and didn't go exactly how we planned or talked about. So that's the second thing I wanted to talk about. So obviously, after the regular season was over, teams meet, they game plan for who they're going to be playing in the first round. Obviously, with the Pistons being the number one seed, they had to wait to see who they're going to be playing in the play-in tournament. Ended up being the Orlando Magic, and obviously they talked about how they wanted to execute a game plan. They had over a week off, and looks like the season was going to be over after they were down 3-1. Right? Franz Wagner gets hurt. Pistons have a little bit more life. They force a game 7 and win their first playoff series since 2008. And I think the one thing in that playoff series that I noticed is Stu's play in the playoffs. In the first couple of games, you saw the rim protection, you saw the switchability, you saw like what we fell in love with this past season, with him protecting the rim and being one of the best shot blockers in the NBA. The 8 block game happened and he was freaking incredible. I want to give him his flowers. That playoff performance, just defensively, blocking the basketball was incredible. But during that 8 block game, he had a block where he came down very awkwardly. He was grimacing in pain, grabbing his knee. And I was like, shit. Like, I hope he's not hurt. I hope he didn't hurt himself. And now this is just me. I don't know anything. I'm not tapped in with any reporters, anything. This is my opinion, pure speculation. And you guys may have the same opinion. You may agree with me. You may not. I felt like after that 8 block game with Stu, he really didn't have the same lift, like protecting the rim. That's what I mean, like the same lift. Felt like he just wasn't really 100%. I know there was an article put out by the Detroit News. Cody Davis wrote the article. He caught up with Stu because, there was a lot of fans pointing out, like, hey, like, Stu doesn't look right. Is he healthy? Is he like 100%? And he's like, yo, I'm good. I'm healthy. And then we started to see the minutes dwindle during the playoffs where Paul Reed became a really big playoff hero for the Pistons, and Stu's minutes kept dwindling down. And I think a lot of people speculated, like, is he 100%? Is he healthy? And I still have those questions during that playoff series because after that 8 block game, like, he was barely playing 8 to 10 minutes a game, and the rim protection wasn't really there. There were some box outs that he usually grabs those rebounds. He didn't really let rebounds go by him. Um, it was just a wild experience in the first round of the playoffs. And we get to the second round of the playoffs versus Cleveland, and it became even more apparent that it looked like he was dealing with something, some nagging injury, maybe just like a sore knee. And Paul Reed was getting more minutes. Obviously, Jalen Duren had probably one of the worst playoffs that we've ever seen from Pistons fans. And I think he maybe had one good game, and it was the elimination game in the first round versus the Magic, where he had like an average Jalen Duren game. Like in the regular season, Duren was great, but kind of circling back to Stu, it just really felt like in the second round, there was no lift. The defense just wasn't there. And JB decided to kind of roll with Paul Reed. And I wanted to put the graphic back up on the screen because he said the playoffs came and it didn't go exactly how we planned or talked about. So obviously they talked about, being the aggressors, you know, defending the rim. And, he had an 8 block game, and you guys can go back and watch that Orlando Magic series during that 8 block game. Has a really hard fall, was limping a little bit, and just was never really the same. But I did find it interesting that they talked about the playoffs and it didn't go how they planned. Obviously, one game away from possibly seeing the Knicks in the Eastern Conference Finals. I would have loved to see that. I don't know if the Pistons would have won, but that would have just been probably one of the most watched Eastern Conference Finals, in my personal opinion. And the Knicks had an incredible playoff run. Like, you got to give them their flowers for that. But the identity thing, I love and respect that Stu did bring that back because that was something that we really didn't have. And he just seemed like such a culture fit, a locker room guy, leader on and off the court. But obviously, he did reestablish that Detroit Pistons culture that a lot of us just love and respect with Isaiah Stewart. Now, The next part of the article is going to be probably the most talked about. A lot of people are posting it online right now, talking about it. And Isaiah Stewart was unappreciated. And this is the full quote from the article. So Stewart said last season he felt his time with the Pistons was ending, feeling underappreciated and confused why things had changed. He and his wife Kylie prayed for a trade for a team that valued him. Quote, when things are out of your control, the only thing you can do is pray, Stewart said. And I was in a situation where you will work so hard and you have a goal and you're putting your all into something and you're not able to get a certain opportunity or reap that kind of reward. Quote, you don't know why, and it'll make you question yourself, stress yourself out because of the passion and love you have for the game. We felt like all we could do is just pray and let the Lord figure it out because he always works things out for us. End quote. So one of the first things in this article from Anscapes that I think a lot of people gravitated towards was Stewart said last season he felt like his time with the Pistons was ending and he felt unappreciated. And kind of prayed for a trade from the Detroit Pistons, and he wanted to go to a team that valued him. Now, I feel like fans valued him. A lot of fans, like I still see a lot of you guys during the live stream podcast, during the comment sections. Like a lot of you guys are still very upset with the overall haul that the Pistons got for trading Isaiah Stewart one, but you're still very upset with how the Pistons went about of trading Stu. And obviously it was to create more cap space. So you were able to, bring in Isaiah Joe, trade for John Collins, and you get two more vets in Torian Prince and Gary Harris, right? After that 6-team trade was completed. But the fact that things have changed, and I don't know what changed. I don't know what changed from JB's first year when they won 44 games as a 6 seed to this past season when they won 60 games. But Stu could feel that something was off within the Detroit Pistons organization. And again, I don't know what role JB Bickerstaff had for Isaiah Stewart. And I know each player does have their defined roles, especially bench players. But the one thing that I never fully agreed with JB Bickerstaff and how he used Isaiah Stewart, I don't know if you guys feel the same way, is we never really got to see him shoot 3-pointers as much as he did under Monty Williams. And I understand you guys, the Monty Williams season was a disaster, but the one bright spot was Stu shot 38% from three. And with JB's first 2 years here in Detroit, like Stu rarely shot 3-pointers. He was more of just a screen setter, uh, crash the glass offensively, try to get some putback points, maybe just a dump off pass from the wings or the guards. And this kind of play bully ball in the paint. He did that, and I think defensively, like his rim protection got even better this past season. He had an opportunity to win Defensive Player of the Month, him and Asar Thompson, because both of those guys were just incredible defensively. But I really don't know why Stu felt unappreciated and wanted the trade from the Detroit Pistons. It kind of sucks to read that things changed. I don't know if it was from the front office. I don't know if it was from a coaching staff, or we're going to decrease your minutes, or we just want you to play within this box and don't come out of that box. If we want you to set picks, grab rebounds, and block shots, that's all you're good for. I really don't know. I could definitely see a world where in Memphis, Stu could have a little bit longer of a leash because Memphis is going through kind of this retooling. I don't want to call it a rebuild because I feel like Memphis is positioned to be a pretty good basketball team. I don't know if they'll make the playoffs, but I feel like their offseason's kind of been underrated in a sense, especially with getting Cam Boozer. They got Stu. They're able to swing a lot of trades and get some pretty intriguing players. And I like their young draft picks from previous years as well. But I could definitely see Stu being a little bit unlocked. Maybe they kind of give him like a Al Horford role where they actually let him shoot a little bit more threes, set picks, and protect the paint. Like that's what I envisioned Stu here in Detroit, but we never really got that. I don't know if that's a JB thing. I don't know if JB didn't want Stu shooting more threes. That was the one nitpicky thing that I just really didn't understand why JB continued to do that, but he did. But they wanted the trade. They got the trade. Later in that article, Mark Spears also talked to Stu's agent, and Trajan, being the general manager, called them and let them know, which I honestly, when I was reading that article, I was like, that's actually pretty cool because a lot of times GMs or just front office members or teams for that matter don't tell players like, hey, like we're going to trade you. It wasn't completely out of the blue. I think Stu knew that there was a good shot that he could get dealt, and the Pistons were just waiting to, find that deal. And Trajan did eventually trade him on the second night of the draft to Memphis, and I wish him well. Cade Cunningham and Jalen Duren also wished him well in that article. That they reached out to him when they heard the news that he did get traded to Memphis. So it kind of sucks though because he's been here for so long, and it's kind of hard not to get attached to players. And I know he was just a role player; he wasn't like a star player, but I felt like he was a star player within his role here in Detroit, if that makes sense. But one more part of this article, and I've told you guys before, like I'm really not interested in just talking about Jalen Duren each and every day. Like there was an update today by ESPN, and I was like, I'm not even touching it, you guys. Like the Duren stuff is just like, unless he signs a contract or signs a qualifying offer, I don't really think he's worth like talking about. But Isaiah Stewart did share his thoughts on JD. It says, quote, Stewart said he believes Jalen Duren should be rewarded. Quote, it's tricky, but Duren has proved his worth. What he's asking for to the organization, if you ask me, Stewart said, they act like they want to prove it before last season, and I felt like he proved it. He was an all-star, third-team All-NBA. I feel like he should get paid. He's a huge core piece. Bring him back. Quote, he's been getting better every year. Third-team All-NBA, All-Star, like, come on, give him the bag. But at the same time, I hope it works out, and I hope he gets the money at the end of the day, end quote. So, obviously, Stu and Jalen Duren, very, very close, honorary dog pound members. I don't know if we're going to have a dog pound anymore with Stu being gone. But kind of shared his thoughts on, JD getting paid. And obviously, I think we understand that the Pistons are in a situation where they want to bring Jalen Duren back, but they want to bring Jalen Duren back where they feel it's fair and they have enough money to kind of build around a Cade Cunningham, a Jalen Duren, and a Sar Thompson. Giving him the max would kind of limit the way you can possibly get, more help down the line. And I fully, like, when I was reading that quote from Stu, it didn't surprise me because I know players support players are all about, one another getting paid for the most part in the NBA, but we're still in a wait and see type of approach. The one little tidbit piece of news with Duren that I did read is they're going to have conversations again in August, but most people don't see a deal getting done until possibly September, closer to the training camp with JD. But before we do say goodbye to you guys, we have to hear from our sponsors over at the FanDuel Sportsbook. And right now, you guys, we have 2026, 2027 Detroit Pistons win odds. So FanDuel has the Pistons set at 48.5 wins, and the over for that is at minus 120, and the under for that is at minus 105. Now, this is actually 2 less games than FanDuel had them about 2 weeks ago. If you guys remember, they were at 50.5. Now they've gone down to 48.5. Now, is that because Philly just has a star-studded roster with LeBron James? I'm not entirely sure, but 48.5, I would probably take that. I've told you guys, like, I honestly think that the Detroit Pistons are a 50-win team. I still think that they will be one of the better teams in the Eastern Conference. I know the offseason we have had, I should say, has been very underwhelming, but I do think they did get marginally better. They have way more perimeter spacing now. Duncan Robinson is not the only player that they're going to have to rely on to make three-point shots. They drafted a possibly secondary ball handler and a backup point guard in Ibuka Okori. We'll have to wait and see. They had a, okay offseason, but 48.5, I think the Pistons will win more than 48 games this upcoming season. But talk to you guys down in the comment section. Let me know what you guys think of this Isaiah Stewart article from Mark Spears over at Anscapes.com with Isaiah Stewart and his time in Detroit, saying how the playoffs didn't really go as planned. Do you guys agree with me that you think that he was hurt after the 8-block game? Him saying that he felt unappreciated and he felt like his time in Detroit was coming to an end, and his thoughts on Jalen Duren getting paid. I'll talk to you guys down below in the comment section. Hope you guys do have a great weekend. Stay safe. And as always, go Pistons. Peace.